Horror is probably one of the most subjective things on the planet, even more so than comedy, I'd have to say. And I think that that's what makes the horror genre as a whole endure as prominently and heavily as it has since 1896, when horror was first explored as a medium of film. And for me personally, there was always a specific type of horror that I tend to gravitate towards a little more when I was in the mood to get scared. And that was always the really weird slasher movies. Movies that just could not even plausibly begin to exist in our world was the thing that drew my attention the absolute most when I was younger or even now. For example, two of my favorite movies, not just horror movies but movies in general, are Hellraiser and Nightmare on Elm Street. Two films that I love so much because no matter which way you look at them, they couldn't feasibly exist in our world. Like with the main villains being these unnatural creatures that don't need to obey our rules and are so unpredictable and intimidating because of that, is what makes these movies so scary to me. So why is it that a film that came out 30 years after these two and doesn't include any of the things I just claimed scare me, isn't just easily the scariest movie that's came out in the last 10 years, but maybe the scariest movie I've ever seen? Well, there's no use drawing it out any longer. As you can obviously tell from the title and thumbnail of the video, we're going to be talking about Creep today. But before we get into that, make sure to hit that subscribe button. We've been growing a lot recently, and I know it's not going to hurt if you hit that like and leave a comment either. Creep was released June 23rd, 2015 and was directed by Patrick Brice and stars himself and Mark Duplass and no one else. Now, with the first two movies I talked about, Nightmare Before Christmas, Nightmare on Elm Street and Hellraiser, I brought up the quality of the movies first and then their scares second. And that's because they're both just genuinely great movies at their core, and the fact that they have any scary moments at all is just icing on the cake. Creep, on the other hand, is an absolute cream pie of horror that just so happens to be a fantastic movie at the same time. And there's one main reason for why I think this is. But before we get into that, there's a couple other things we gotta go over first. Starting with... So Creep follows Aaron, played here by Patrick Brice, the director. Aaron is a down-on-his-luck photographer who stumbles upon a Craigslist ad offering big money to film a day in the life for the client. And who is that client, you might ask? Well, I'll get into that a little more later. But basically, he comes across a complete psychopath, and we as an audience know that something's up because we know what movie we're watching, and even before he gets there, Aaron does too. The red flags are off the fucking wall from the jump. So as a viewer of the movie, a lot of the fun and fear you get is from watching the events unfold and escalate so quickly. The movie doesn't waste your time, and in practically a matter of seconds in, you already know that Aaron's fucked, even if you don't know what the movie's about. You're just waiting for the inevitable to happen on the edge of your seat. And Creep does such a good job in conveying this by using... As you can probably tell by now from the background footage, Creep is a found footage film. And now, hold on. I know most people, especially now after the complete oversaturation of found footage movies in the marketplace, roll their eyes at the mere thought of that infamous shaky cam that's so entwined with the genre. And I can't even really blame you. For every wreck or Cloverfield, there's a Devil's Due or a pyramid. But I can tell you right now, Creep does it the best. If I were to be in Aaron's exact situation and have to record this dude and experience all this shit, this is exactly how I do it too. It would look literally no different. Cause I know that's one of the main complaints with found footage is how unbelievable it is and how it doesn't make any sense that they'd be recording over all this time. Especially with found footage horror movies. Well, Creep avoids that issue by not doing it. There are huge jumps in time where Aaron just doesn't even pick up the camera. Vital scenes occur off screen, and there are even parts where the camera is just completely out of focus or just straight up turned off with a black screen for minutes at a time. This in turn makes Creep one of the most captivating films I've ever watched, and puts me more into the shoes of the main character, and delivers a more personal experience than most movies would ever even dream of. Now, I'm not the connoisseur on found footage movies. I've maybe watched, a dozen in my lifetime, but where most of these just serve as a cheap and obvious gimmick, Creep feels the most genuine and authentic. You really get to see what the camera sees, and sometimes that's nothing at all. And sometimes it's... Alright, now we really get into the good stuff. So, like a year or two ago, some big production company or some shit came out with an article describing which movie psychopath was the most realistic, and Anton Chigurh from No Country for Old Men won, and it's definitely a strong choice.
Friendo.
But I've never really met a real psychopath, I don't think, but I'm just gonna go out on a limb here and say, if Joseph was one of these contestants, this outcome would have turned out very different. Cause never in my life have I felt so absolutely terrified of another human being. Especially one that I, and realistically most people watching this video, can most likely beat the complete shit out of in a fair fight. Now, I'm gonna be honest, I wasn't too familiar with who Mark Duplass was before watching Creep, and from what I can tell, it seems like this was one of his first, and at this point really only horror roles. Which I mean is just not okay. Like, what are we doing, Hollywood? Let's get this guy in some more roles, man. Joseph perfectly embodies that on-the-surface innocence with the perfect amount of creepiness and unsettling mannerisms in the first half of the film that completely mindfucks your brain and leaves you mainly just concerned about Aaron, which, side note here, Bryce not only did an amazing job directing the movie, but he also did great playing Aaron as well. The quietness, the suspicion, the fascination with Joseph. You spend the movie literally in his shoes due to the found footage aspects, and he's such a subversion from the stereotypical clueless horror character that you don't want to see him getting hurt because he makes all the same moves that you would in this situation. And because of that, you want to hold out hope that he'd be okay just so that you could really see how you'd fare if this were to ever happen to you. But back to the real star of the show now. Down to his attire, Joseph plays this part perfectly. The simplistic dark clothes leave so much to the imagination and leave me looking over my shoulder to see if fucking Steve Jobs is coming after me. Even the Peach Fuzz mask, bro. I used to have a mask almost identical to this one as a kid, and you are high if you think it was scaring anyone. But throw it on Joseph and have him give a backstory on how he raped his wife with it on, and suddenly you never look at your dog the same way. He's just fucking scary, I don't know what to say. He's so unpredictable and authentic to what you think when you really think about a serial killer. He's not some 7-foot tall guy in a mask chasing you through the forest or a demon from another dimension. As I already said, he's not even very physically capable. He tortures his victims, especially Aaron, with his mind. He gets into their heads. And that's when he really does the damage and shows how terrifying he can be. Until finally he gets you weak enough that he can be that traditional serial killer we all fear. It really just leaves you wondering how long you'd last if you chose to accept that Craigslist ad that day. So for a little recap, you got the whole concept with this innocent dude accepting an ad to try and make an extra buck, which, I mean, I used to go to random people's houses and mow their lawns, and that was when I was like 12, so the whole crux of the plot definitely struck a personal nerve by showing the absolute worst case of a scenario that I used to put myself in daily. Then you got the way it's directed, which gives the most personal feel out of anything else in the film. The camera only really stays on out of fear and chance and leaves a little too much up to the imagination. And then finally there's Joseph himself, an undisputed horror icon in my book, easily up there with the likes of Freddy, Jason, Chucky, and Leatherface and all the rest of the classics, yet even still somehow in his own complete lane. It's the way he can blend in with the rest of society and get you to your absolute lowest, even where and when you feel the most safe. He messes with you until he gets bored and disposes of you, and you definitely won't be his last victim. You were never even his first.
It's all over.
If you made it this far, please hit that like button, and if you want to see more, hit the subscribe button as well. I'd definitely really appreciate it. I should have another video up this week, so stay tuned for that. And with all that being said, I've been Colt45. See you next time.